Hi, this is Ellen Zimmer, Director of Early Childhood Education. Welcome back to the 18-19 school year. Today we're going to talk about the Brigance assessment. This is a refresher training for those teachers and staff who have already had the face-to-face initial training. We'll just talk about the assessment as well as analyzing the data and some of the next steps once the assessment is complete. Today's objectives are to explain the rationale of Kentucky's Brigance screening, to identify the steps, that is, the core assessment, the self-help, the social-emotional scales. We'll touch on supplemental assessments. Those are not required pieces, but are optional for teachers to complete for more information, to analyze screening results for next steps, and to share screening results with families, as well as understand the requirements for implementation. The purpose of Kentucky's Common Kindergarten Entry Screen Initiative is to ensure that every child entering kindergarten in the state has been assessed using a common tool to determine his or her readiness, and for the teacher to have the information to provide intervention and to meet the needs of the child as they enter the classroom. 2018 and 19 implementation. So now we know the big picture of the initiative. Let's talk about the implementation. This year, for 2018-19, we've been implementing for 6 years as a state. The first year in 2012-13 was a pilot year, and if you were in kindergarten in that year, you would recognize that we've been doing Brigance for longer than that. The emphasis has now shifted on planning for instruction rather than just assessing the students. So today the focus will turn towards analyzing data and making next steps for children. Highlights from 2017-18. On this screen, you'll see the state data listed in blue and Kenton County School District data listed in red. You'll notice the state screened 41,987 students, and in Kenton County, we screened 881 students last year. Kindergarten readiness was comparable. We were above the state. The state is at 51.4% and Kenton County is at 57.4%. This is an increase over prior years. The percentage of students receiving free and reduced lunch who scored kindergarten ready was 41.3% for the state and 39.1% for Kenton County School District. If we move on to look at the self-help and social-emotional areas, we're above the state in self-help at 53%, and in social-emotional, we compared just about the same, 77.8% for the state and 77.4% for the average or above average in Kenton County School District. There are many benefits to the stakeholders of this initiative. Kindergarten children will benefit because their instruction will be targeted to their strengths and needs, and they will be more quickly referred to RTI if needed. Teachers are getting better information to help with planning, and parents are receiving information about their child's skills so they're aware of any needs and can help reinforce skills at home, building that important homeschool connection. Screening tools. The Brigance Kindergarten Screen is a tool that was chosen to assess kindergarten readiness skills. It takes a look at the 5 developmental domains, and you'll see those listed on the screen: motor, language, academic, cognitive, self-help, social-emotional development. We'll use the core assessment and the self-help social-emotional scales, which are both required components to assess those 4 pieces. Data is collected and aggregated in the online management system as it has been in the past. As you know, it will take about 10 to 15 minutes to screen each child. For the core assessments, the self-help social-emotional scales are completed by the parents in a survey fashion. Developmental screening is a brief procedure that is used to identify a child's strengths and needs as they relate to school readiness. They may also be used in identifying children who need further evaluation for potential delays, which would require intervention, or potential giftedness, which we can provide enrichments. Identifying children early will increase the effectiveness of these efforts since we are starting as soon as possible to provide support. A quick look at the Brigance kit. The Early Childhood Screen 3, K&1, includes the manual. You should have objects for counting and sorting, and you should have screen assessments and tools. You'll need your data sheets, as well as paper, pencil, a blank page or lined paper, a picture book that has at least 3 lines of text, and a timer. You will also want to have your implementation guide handy to reference. So the general steps for screening include getting ready to screen, screening the child using the required tools, completing the data sheet, coming together to analyze results, and identifying next steps. So step 1, getting ready to screen. This is the most important. Planning ahead and identifying accommodations and gathering materials will help your assessment to go smoothly. Planning ahead on this screen is shown as a team. Talk about the process with your administrators and your grade level team and use a collaborative process to assess and arrange assessments. Best practices. Surveys indicate that teamwork is essential for the successful implementation. Make some decisions about who is going to screen. Each school sets their screenings up just a little bit differently. So who in your school will provide the screening to your students? Will it be instructional assistants, teachers, intervention staff? A solid plan will help the implementation go smoothly. Screening students with special considerations. Accommodations versus modifications. It's important to know the difference between an accommodation and a modification. Accommodations are those things that allow children to access an assessment and more accurately demonstrate their knowledge. An example would be allowing the child more time to respond. A modification, on the other hand, is a change to the actual content of the assessment. An example would be having a child point to an object rather than name it. Do not use modifications as they would invalidate the scores. So modifications are not allowed. English language learners. For children whose primary language is not English and whose English is not adequate for screening in that language, you will need to have an interpreter present. Kathy Pruitt will be assessing all EL students and identify the needs for an interpreter. Do not assess these students as alternate arrangements will need to be scheduled through your point of contact. It is essential to become familiar with the kindergarten screen before screening. This is a page out of the manual. You'll notice that an overview and domain is provided for each subtest. Beneath that are the specific skills being assessed. The material required is listed next. Scoring information gives you the information you need to accurately assess the skills. It is important to follow the scoring information listed, especially the discontinue points. The discontinue point tells you at which point you need to stop a skill and move on to the next. In this example, the discontinue point is 3 incorrect responses in a row. Next, notes and possible observations include other things you may want to be watching for as you screen. These observations add depth to the screening and can help examiners be aware of other issues that may bear noting. Finally, directions provide clear verbal scripting and other information for accurate screening. The lines you see in blue are the questions you ask the child. You must use the scripting. This ensures that every child is receiving the same standardized assessment. Some notes to remember. Personal data response in Part 1A. Students will need to state their name. Acceptable responses include their legal name, or their given name, such as Catherine. Nicknames like Katie or Debbie for Deborah are allowed if this is primarily what the child is known as. Do not get credit for nicknames or pet names like Buddy, Sweetie Pie, Princess. The child will also need to know their phone number. Any reasonable, responsible adult phone number is fine. They'll be asked their address. The student should respond with their street name and house number. In Part 2A, the child names parts of the body. It's best to point to your parts of the body to help them identify. In Part 3A, gross motor skills, it's okay to demonstrate these skills for the child. In Part 4A, visual motor skills, be sure to have a photocopy of the student page for the child to respond with shapes. Part 5A, prints personal information. Have the child use the sheet for visual motor skills and print their name. Part 6A recites the alphabet. Be careful here. They need to recite the alphabet and not sing their ABCs. Part 7A sorts objects. Use the word large and not big when you're giving directions in this item. Part 8A. Part 8A is counting by rote. Part 9A, matching quantities with numerals. They suggest using objects and not fingers for this section. Part 10A determines total of 2 sets. 11A reads uppercase letters. It is required in Kentucky to use the uppercase letters. If you'd like to know if they're familiar with lowercase, that's optional and wouldn't be part of this scoring. Part 12A, experience with book and text. Be sure you have a book with at least 3 lines of text available for this section. Remember to pay attention to the discontinue points as you are giving the test. Use the directions as they are written. And it's helpful to have sticky notes just in case you need to make any quick references as you're assessing. Let's take a look at the data sheet. It's the same data sheet we've used in years past. You'll notice the page numbers down the left side. The domains are identified. The screening process is easy, and so is the interpretation of the data. You'll see that you're circling answers that the students have gotten correct and putting a slash through answers that the student has gotten wrong. The discontinue points are listed right on this sheet, so you have them as a handy reference as you're giving the students the assessment. We do not need to score when we enter the data into the OMS. It will be scored for you. Remember, no scoring is necessary, no calculation of the child's age. Simply circle the answer the students got correct, draw a slash through the answers the students miss, and this will be input into the OMS system and scoring will happen automatically. So the materials that you'll take with you when you sit down with a student are your implementation guide, your screening manual, your data sheets, your counting and sorting items, pencil and paper, a picture book, and any photocopies that you might need. Let's talk about step 2, screening the child. These children will have been in your classroom for a week or 2 before the screening. You should have rapport with the student as you want the child to be comfortable with the adult and with the environment in which they're screening. Some important considerations. We want the child's answers to be automatic. Do not provide cues or hints for the child. If you're providing cues or hints, that may artificially inflate the scores. So stick to the script. Remember, it's the blue questions in your manual. Step 3 is completing the data sheet. We've covered this when we reviewed the data sheet with circling the correct answers and slashing the incorrect answers. This can also be done on a computer or an iPad. If you're proficient with the scoring and it wouldn't be a distraction to the child, it would be fine to complete on the computer as you are assessing the student. Just remember, you don't want it to be a distraction. Self-help and social-emotional scales. This is the parent portion of the assessment. It is required that this tool be completed as part of the kindergarten screen. This is a measure of the student's self-help skills such as eating, toileting, pre-vocational, and dressing. The social-emotional skills in playing and getting along with others. These scales can be used to gain a broader understanding of the child's developmental level. So you will have a parent form that the parent will fill out. It can be sent home in a backpack. You can use it as an interview tool, and during one of your parent nights, have an interview session with the parents to mark their answers and clarify any questions they may have. There is also a teacher form that can be completed as we near the deadline after multiple attempts have been tried to complete the parent form. This would be used as a last resort. This screen is a picture of the Self-Help Social Emotional Scale survey for the parents. Because there's a lot of information on the form, you may want to interview the parent or caregiver. There have been some schools in the district that have made a phone call to the parents and received this information through an interview over the phone, or at a Ready Fest, an open house, or a parent visit, have interviewed the parents face-to-face. The Self-Help Social Emotional Parent Form is also available in Spanish should you have any families that require the Spanish form. Refer back to the implementation guide for guidance on when to use this Spanish tool. The Self-Help Social Emotional Scales must be completed by the 30th instructional day. If you cannot get the scales completed by a parent, you would be able to use the teacher form. In that case, just work with your point of contact and myself, and we will get you the teacher form for completion. In addition to screening EL students in their native language, parent surveys should be collected as well. Spanish is available, as I mentioned, and you will need to work with affordable languages to have the students assessed in their native language. Be aware that as that interpreter is assessing the students, you may want to have them working with the parent survey as well. Again, if that's not possible, we can do the teacher form if the parent form cannot be obtained. Online management system. This is the same system we've used in the past. They do refresh it every year, so it will be brand new this year. The online management data sheet looks very similar to the data sheet that you would complete by hand. This is the sheet that you will either reference the data sheet to enter the data or use while you're assessing the students. If you use the data sheet on the computer to assess the students, you will want to print a copy to keep in the child's folder upon completion. Step 4, let's talk about analyzing results. Now that we've administered all of the assessments, the next step, step 4, is to determine what those results indicate about a child's performance. Remember, as we look at each assessment, we'll want to consider a child's strengths as well as his or her needs, and we'll also want to consider reasons why a child may not have performed in a given area. Analyzing kindergarten core assessment results. The key concept here is that the child's core assessment score is compared to 2 cutoff scores. The highest kindergarten core assessment total is 100 points. When the screen was standardized on almost 2,000 children, their scores were compared and analyzed to see which score indicates that a child is scoring below this score and might have a potential delay or red flag that would indicate the child needs support, or above this score indicating the child might be advanced. In Kentucky, when our students are compared to these cutoff scores, we will see the labels not ready if they score low, ready with enrichments if they score above the cutoff, and ready if they score in between. The great thing is that after completing the screen with the children, we'll take our data sheets, transfer the results into the OMS system, which will automatically compare it to those cutoff scores. We can then assess each child's screening summary report, which will show us all the information in an easy-to-read way. Analyzing core assessment results. As you can see here, this child's total score on the core assessments puts her in the ready range for kindergarten. As you can also see, that's really easy to read on this report. Now you're probably curious for more in-depth information so that you can really begin to analyze at a deeper level. The OMS is going to help us with a further analysis of this child's performance on the screen by breaking down the child's performance in each domain. Further down on your report, you'll see more bar graphs for each major domain. Look at the example here. How did this child perform in the cognitive general knowledge domain? In the language and communication development? How about physical well-being? Let's take a look at another child's results. First, we see the child's total score. Notice on this bar graph that this child scored below the cutoff score, and so it is in the range of not ready. This is a red flag. For this child, you would consider initiating the RTI process. How did this child perform in the cognitive general knowledge area? Language and communication? And how about physical well-being? Using this graph, we can quickly pinpoint the areas that brought down the child's score. Therefore, we have some good information about the child that will help inform the RTI process. Also, consider information you have from the family, your observations of that child, and of course other assessments. That will ensure that this child gets the intervention that he or she needs as soon as possible. Analysis of self-help and social-emotional scale results. The self-help social-emotional scales is the second required tool in the kindergarten screen and can give us a lot of great information to add to our picture of this child. You'll enter the responses from the scales into the OMS, and once those have been entered, the results will appear on the child's screening summary report, along with the results of the core assessments that we looked at a few minutes ago. Remember, every question needs an answer to be able to submit those responses. What might this tell us, in addition to what we already know from the results of the two other tools we just looked at? Also consider additional information you have from the family and any observations you have made. With all of these results, we need to identify next steps. We'll examine 3 areas. What do we do if the tool has raised a red flag? How should we plan for instruction on the results? And sharing these results with families. Next steps for red flags. The results of the tools you have administered, particularly the required core assessments and the self-help and social-emotional scales, may show a cause for concern. For example, the child whose results we looked at earlier showed below average ability in cognitive and general knowledge and language and communication domains. Putting that child in a class without extra support may not be enough to help that child make the gains that he or she needs in order to catch up. Conversely, if a child had scored in the Ready with Enrichment level, that child might also not realize her full potential without additional support. The K-screen data can be used as one piece of information in determining next steps for individual children using your school RTI process. Next steps for planning instruction. The next step would be to begin planning instruction which will be easier now that you have some consistent data upon which to make these decisions. After reviewing scores, you can compare commonalities across the class to help you plan instructional groups. The Brigance Readiness Activities is a resource you will have access to through the OMS. This resource provides activities and parent letters for each area covered by the Brigance tools. We have access to it and we should take advantage of it. Next steps, instruction. Of course, you're going to look at your regular classroom instructional materials in order to implement your instructional plan. In addition, Brigance has a collection of activities that I mentioned called the Readiness Activities. The Readiness Activities provide lesson plans for activities and support for skills in the kindergarten core assessment and beyond. In addition to the activities themselves, there are recommendations for teaching the skills, family letters in English and in Spanish, reproducible learning plans for students to take home or to display in class. It will be important to share these results with families. Remember that if the child scored below the not ready cutoff, the child should be referred for RTI and follow the guidelines of reporting this to your families and working with your school RTI team. Children who do not score below the not ready cutoff, share the results with the parents, preferably face-to-face. That isn't always possible, but if you have an opportunity arise, consider sharing these results face-to-face. There is a parent report in the OMS that could be utilized. Be specific with the parents so they know what skills they can help their child with at home. Resources and the 2018-19 timeline. So in June and July, materials were shipped to your school. Those should have arrived and be available for all of the new classrooms opening this year. In August, staff training will begin. 3 hours for those teachers and staff who have not given the Brigance assessment previously. And this 1-hour training as a refresher for those who do have experience with the Brigance. Also in August, the OMS training videos for data entry will be available. The screening windows and data entry windows are listed below. The prior setting data can be collected anytime, so consider your Ready Fest, an open house, phone interviews, or times when you might have parents in your building or available to provide prior setting information for their child. From September 4th through the 7th will be our student assessment days. That is, the students will be in school for a week or two prior to giving the assessment. On these days, we will focus on assessing all of our kindergarten students who are enrolled at that time. Between July 31st and September 26th, the parent report self-help social emotional scales will need to be completed. If you've made multiple attempts and are having difficulty getting the parents to complete this survey, by September 17th, you may consider the teacher report. This can be used in place of the parent report when you're not able to obtain that information. We're looking to have all data entered into the OMS and into IC by September 21st. This will allow us time to quickly review our lists and our data to see if any students had been missed. As you know, students do enroll late, and some students will need to be assessed outside the September 4th through 7th week. We'll have up until September 26th to assess those students. September 26th is the last day for our window for Brigance. No information can be gathered following that date. From September 26th through October 15th, I will be working to review the data and to clean up any errors or duplications that may have happened as we collected. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please look to your implementation guide. Just about everything is covered within this guide, offering you the support you might need. Additionally, you're welcome to contact myself or your early childhood point of contact for more information and question help. So your next steps. The Brigance website offers lots of training videos and opportunity for more information. You'll just log on to brigance.com/Kentucky. The training information can be found through the orange button. Continue preparing as an individual. Review all of your materials, your scripts, find your book, gather your papers, and then work as a team to plan and schedule for a smooth implementation. Thanks for your participation in this webinar, and let me know if you have any questions.